Hey YouTube, Rob here again, and I'm finally getting to where I can upload the second lesson in the Spanish Language Instructional Series. And this lesson will be slightly different, not too much different. In the first series of lessons, I actually spoke the words that were written on the page. And the reason why I did that was to give those who aren't familiar with the language a feel for the pronunciation. So for this video at least, I won't sit there and read to you what's right in front of your face. But in future lessons I might, in order to illustrate a point. But this lesson is going to cover the gender of nouns, how to form plurals in Spanish, the definite article, and the indefinite article. And one user made a comment that I need to get a whiteboard to do this on, and I really want to get a whiteboard, but right now I can't really afford one. But eventually I promise I'll get a whiteboard, and I'm hoping to put it back up on that wall right behind me, and I can just zoom into it and go from there, sort of like how YouTube user Lao Shu does. Anyway, looking at the gender of nouns, Spanish has two noun genders, masculine and feminine. This is something that's different from English in that in English we don't really have any gendered nouns, but if you've studied Latin or German or French or any language that has noun genders, you'll be familiar with this concept. Masculine nouns in Spanish typically end in O, and feminine nouns in Spanish typically end in A. There are exceptions to these rules. They'll be covered a little bit later in the video. And many nouns in Spanish end in consonants or in the letter E, or as you would say in Spanish, E. And the gender of these nouns can be either masculine or feminine. And in order to figure out what the gender is, you can look up the definite or the indefinite article of the word, or even if there's an adjective in context with the word that modifies it, you could be able to tell the gender as well. Even a pronoun that's modifying the word could act as a way to identify the gender as well. So in Spanish, we form plurals pretty much the same way that we do in English for most words. We always add s or es to the end of the word in Spanish. If the noun ends in a vowel, whether it's o or a or even e, then we add s. And notice that when you do this, when it ends in an e, it looks like we have an es ending, but in actuality all we're doing is just adding s to the end of the word that already ends in e. And if the noun ends in a consonant, you add es, as you see here. Some nouns, there aren't very many of them, but some nouns require a stem change in order to form the plural. And the only one that I can think of off the top of my head is lapis, which means pencil, which ends in z here, becomes lapises by changing the z to a c and adding es. And there's a few nouns that do this, but right now that's the only one off the top of my head that I can think of that actually does that. So now we're going to look at the definite article, which can be translated into English as the. And they're both singular and plural, as well as masculine and feminine nouns. So as you can see here, these all mean the. El, la, los, and las. And as you can see, all definite articles, no matter what the form is, they always agree with the noun they modify, both in gender and number. So just for example purposes, el dedo means the finger, el borrador means the eraser. Notice how these agree in gender as well as number. And los bolsos, which means the pockets, basically. Actually, pocket is bolsillo, but whatever. La boca, the mouth, la nariz, the nose, las plumas, the pens. Notice how, again, the definite article agrees with the noun that it modifies, both in gender and number. And again, notice that the gender of nouns that don't end in o or a can be determined by looking at the definite article. So here, el borrador, it doesn't end in o or a, it ends in ere, but we can tell that it's masculine because of the definite article that modifies it. And same thing with la nariz here. So closely related to the definite article is the indefinite article, which can be translated as a or an in the singular or some in the plural. And just like the definite article, there are different forms for the singular and plural, as well as the masculine and feminine forms. Un, una, unos, and unas. And again, just for example purposes, un refresco, un jugo, unos coches. Notice that these agree in gender and number with the nouns they modify. Una pluma, a pen, una ciudad, a city, and unas botellas, which means some bottles. So again, notice that it agrees in gender and number. And noun genders can also be identified by using the indefinite article. Una ciudad ends in de, but we can tell that it's feminine because it's modified by una. Some nouns in Spanish, actually I skipped a page, sorry. Just a few words of advice here about noun genders. Not all nouns that follow the o or a rule. For example, mano ends in o, but it's la mano. So mano is actually a feminine noun even though it ends in o. And el mapa. So mapa ends in a, but it's modified by el, so it's masculine. Just some tips that might help you. The majority of nouns that end in ma are masculine, and you can look at that as ma ending ma masculine. So the only one that doesn't that I can think of off the top of my head is la pluma, which is feminine. But for example, el programa. And then nouns that end in this dad ending, dad, are feminine. Think of an electric complex. That's the only way I can help you to try to remember that. Girls like men that are old enough to be their dads. I don't know. La ciudad, the city. La felicidad, the happiness. So it's always a good idea to memorize the definite article. If I can get my hand out of the way. It's always a good idea to memorize the definite article when you learn a noun, so that you learn the gender of that noun as well. Some nouns can be masculine or feminine depending on who they refer to. So for example, estudiante, which means student. Masculine, you can have un estudiante or el estudiante, referring to one male student. And plural, unas estudiantes or los estudiantes, referring to more than one male student, or referring to more than one student, at least one of which is male. So I'll explain that in just a minute. Feminine, you can have una estudiante or la estudiante, which refers to one female student. You can have unas estudiantes or las estudiantes, which refers to a group of all female students. So just some examples here on this. One male student is el estudiante. 3 male students, los estudiantes. 2 female students, las estudiantes, because they're all female. And 8 female, 2 male students would be los estudiantes. If there is even one male in the group of items that you're referring to, it's always masculine. I know, Spanish is a chauvinistic language. So I wrote just here some exercises for you to practice if you so wish to do that. If you don't, that's fine. If you just want to blow through these videos, that's fine. But for those of you that are really serious about learning this, I just came up with some exercises here. Give both the singular and plural forms to the following nouns using both the definite and indefinite articles. El grupo, la casa, unas bebidas, and unos hombres. And give all possible forms in gender and number of the following nouns using both the definite and indefinite articles. These are ones that can be either male or female depending on who they refer to. You can have el presidente, which is the president, or el or la abogado or abogada, which means lawyer. So that concludes the second lesson in Spanish, and I think the third lesson, I haven't made it yet, but I think the third lesson will cover the verb to be, as well as possibly how to introduce yourself to somebody. So thank you for watching, thank you for your attention, and I'll get the third lesson posted up here as soon as possible. Thanks.